In a time of great turmoil and crisis, we look to our leaders for comfort, direction, some sort of understanding. So I've asked Bishop Craig Worsham, pastor of Agape Church LA, to join us this morning to get his reaction and perhaps some guidance as to how we should be acting, how we should be reacting, and what's God's plan in all of this. Pastor Worsham, it's great to be with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Carlos. Glad to be here with you.
So let me ask you, what is your reaction of this last week's amazing events that we have seen all across our country?
Well, it has, for me, been a little topsy-turvy in my emotions. Number one, watching the death of George Floyd. But then weeks before, watching the death of the young man in Georgia, black boy by the name of Ahmaud Arbery. Mm-hmm. All of these killings over the years, it has pierced my heart, it's pierced my soul, it has pierced the heart of millions across the world. Blacks, whites, browns, all nationalities coming together to speak up and demand justice, just not temporary justice, but permanent justice across our nation. What we are seeing are individuals now with the protesting, the marching, the rioting, the looting, all boils down to years of frustration. And what we have tried to do is suppress the people. And so without action or without change that is permanent, we will continue to see these killings. We will continue to see these unrest. And so what I'm seeing now with the changes from our mayor, mm-hmm. what I see now with the arrest and charging of the officers involved there, and the court case proceedings that have already began in Georgia with the Ahmaud Arbery case, the voices of the people are being heard. And now we are seeing immediate action being put into place, which I believe in this moment is not temporary action, but it is leading to permanent action.
So this is possibly a watershed time in our history when we thought that was 1992 here in Los Angeles, and it may have been for us, for our city, because things have definitely changed here for the better. You've been very active with the police department, with the city leaders to change the way policing is done in Los Angeles. But perhaps that hasn't stretched across the country, and the message hasn't been clear enough. Did this add clarity, even though it was so confusing and so violent and so riotous? Is it actually offering a moment of clarity?
It's offering a moment of clarity, but I will say this, as you mentioned a moment ago, even what we have done in our local church to build a bridge between community and law enforcement. The relationship between community and law enforcement has been fractured. As a matter of fact, I would even go further to say it is literally on the brink of being destroyed. We made progress from 1992 when that relationship between community and law enforcement was fractured. We made progress. We began to build a bridge. This is 1992, literally all over again. Okay. And so what I believe we need to do is to continue. Well, once the marching has completed, because I believe people need to exercise that right. People need to speak their heart. People need to speak their mind. Once this has completed, we have to really encourage every person, every young person that is in across our country marching and protesting. We need to encourage them to come together to the table for synergy. And we must mobilize, and we must begin to talk legislation and policy if we're going to see the permanent change we're marching for.
Well, the problem has always been, is there a willingness? There seems to be political nice speak. Yes, we'll do this, we're going to change, and then nothing really happens. And this is what I'm talking about with Watershed, that perhaps being threatened the way so many people feel threatened by these demonstrations and the protests, that finally the hammer has been completely penetrated and crash through the problems that we've been facing as a society with regard to color.
Yes. 50 states coming together, protesting and marching against systemic racism, injustice, and in particular within the context of what we're facing now, law enforcement policy reform, 50 states coming together. I think our leaders in these states, from the council to the state legislators, are getting the picture now that we will no longer stand for talk. We are demanding action, not temporary action, because sometimes I feel like our leadership gives us what we're asking for temporarily. And then policies are changed that perhaps we're not a part of or aware of. And we're back to the same system, the same business as usual. And then here we go again, a replay of what we have witnessed with the George Floyd killing. I want us to implement policies now so we are not back in this space 90 days from now or 12 months from now.
Yeah. I know that in your, the church motto is loving, lifting, and liberating. And so as I think about our world right now and the turmoil that we've had with the pandemic and now this situation, and it feels very much like God has abandoned us, Pastor.
Mm-hmm. It seems as we are, as a country, I say, in 3 concurrent pandemics. COVID-19, and as you know, and I know you've read, African Americans have died from this pandemic at disproportionate rates. We've got systemic racism that we're dealing with, and our nation is in an unrest. 3 concurrent pandemics at one time, and thousands marching in the streets, no social distancing, in the middle of a lethal pandemic. God has not abandoned us. I don't believe God has abandoned us. I believe God is speaking to us. He has awakened us. Sometimes we become a little complacent, and then when things go awry, we wake up. He's reminding us, I believe, in this moment that all of us as believers in our various faiths, one thing that joins us together, whether it be Muslim, Buddhist, Christian, one thing that holds us all together is that we are all taught to love humankind, to do good to all of humanity. So this is a reminder to all of us. Let's not become comfortable in our homes and in our lives. No, all of us have not been victims of police violence. Perhaps we don't have individuals in our families that have been victims of police violence. I was sharing with a colleague yesterday, I've been pulled over for speeding and things of that nature, but I have never personally had a bad experience with a law enforcement officer in my life. So I don't know personally what that feels like. However, I believe that I have a responsibility to use the influence God has given me through the relationships I have within law enforcement to hold our friends in that arena accountable and responsible for what is happening in our community within the various law enforcement agencies. So this is an awakening. And I believe now that I have a responsibility to encourage and mobilize those protesters in the street to sit at the table and have responsible dialogue. The dialogue we have with leadership must be pointed, and it must be responsible. And it must be articulated in a way that they understand what we need and when we expect to see it.
Pastor Worsham, let me conclude with this. Let me ask you, what will your message on Sunday be? What would you tell those young people on the streets who are so passionate about change? and about their message. What will you be saying to them on Sunday morning?
I'm holding on to two words. These two words have not left me. We sat with the mayor on Tuesday for some 90 minutes, having some very serious and tough conversations centered around the defunding of the LAPD. There are two words that I use: accountability and responsibility. What do I mean by that? Number one, mayor, leaders of our city, we are holding you accountable for what is happening today. But number two, we're going to hold ourselves responsible for the action items. We have marched, we have protested, we have raised our voices, we have had town halls, we have sat around the table. Now, those of us that want justice and equality and change must be responsible. As we hold leaders accountable, we must be responsible, which means you must come to the table with pointed ideas and recommendations to shift the culture of our law enforcement agencies. We must be responsible for the change we want to see, and we must vote. That is very important. But after we vote, we must understand the laws of our city. We must understand proposed legislation within the state of California and federal legislation. We must be responsible for mobilizing an army of people that will keep our leaders accountable. So those are the two words that I'm dealing with really over the next several weeks: accountability and responsibility.
Bishop Craig Worsham, pastor of Agape Church LA, thank you so much for your words and your perspective on this. I wish you well. God bless you, and thank you for your leadership in Los Angeles.
Thank you.